Hi, everybody. This is Signal and Insights, the podcast. I am Gabriel Velez, CEO of Crowd Answers. This is the show where we sit down with the people shaping how businesses grow, sell, and make smarter decisions. My guest today took two master's degrees, one in anthropology and one in gender and cultural studies. Spent years of doing fieldwork and teaching in New Orleans, and then quietly built one of the most distinctive market research agency on the West Coast. Her firm is a whole philosophy in 4 words: assume nothing, question everything. Jenny Carubian, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for the lovely introduction. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about your background. You were teaching anthropology in New Orleans and building a research agency in LA at the same time.
hmm
So, what were you actually doing, and what did running those two tracks in parallel teach you about yourself?
So I was originally doing an academic path. I was pursuing a PhD, and I was pursuing research that I was doing on at the U.S. Mexican border. And a war broke out in the place that I was meaning to do my field work, which basically made the field work impossible because it's really not a very safe space to be doing dissertation research in the middle of a war zone. So I pivoted away from doing a PhD in anthropology, and I left with a master's degree. And the things that I really enjoyed doing were research and teaching. Those are the things I really love the most. So I started teaching. I taught as an adjunct for about 10 years. And then I started building my own research practice. And I started as a freelancer, and I freelanced for about 4 years. Um, and then I started my own agency, and making the move from freelancer to an agency was actually quite a jump for me, especially not just doing things on my own and kind of as support work, but really needing support work myself, from other people, and being able to hire things out and really work with end clients directly. So there were a lot of pivots that needed to be made to go from kind of just the freelancer model to having an agency. And I made that jump, and it's been 12 years since I started the company. The company turned 12 actually this month in June. And
Congratulations.
it's been a really good run, and lots of crazy changes and ups and downs. And the world has changed significantly in the last 12 years, and rolling with all of those changes. And we're still here. So yeah, it's been quite a journey.
That's nice story. And can you tell me a little bit more? There was a specific moment in the classroom where you realized that where learning belonged more in a commercial context?
I'm sorry, can you rephrase that? Can you tell me a little bit
Yeah,
more
yeah.
about it?
That was a specific moment when you say, "Hey, I am ready to start my company,"
Oh,
instead of
yeah. I
yeah
mean,
doing.
I was teaching for different reasons than I was doing research. Um, I really enjoyed teaching, for quite some time. That was, something that I loved to do, but it was more like a passion project, at that point, because I was teaching night school and I was teaching as an adjunct. So, I would taught like 2 to 3 classes, like, per term. But research was um, really got my attention in more kind of reward, like, teaching was rewarding in some ways, but then I found, like, I enjoyed research because it's constant learning, right? So when you're teaching, you're taking the things that you learned and you're transmitting it to other people. But when you're doing research, there's a lot of learning that goes into it. And I found like I felt like I was really learning from every study that I was doing, and learning in a way that was much more practical than what I had done in academia, because academia is much more theoretical. And I remember the first few studies that I did just really blowing my mind. Like, like, I did a study on a hospital, and like a hospital that had done a rebrand, and that had, kind of switched owners, and nobody in the community wanted to go to this hospital, and they couldn't figure out why. And so, we were working on, kind of understanding how to shift a community over to using a brand new hospital, and like what that takes and what reservations people had about it. The truth is, the other hospital, the old brand, had a really bad staph infection breakout that everybody knew about. And so, even though it changed ownership, everybody still associated it with that really bad outbreak of staph, right? And that just I was blown away by, how these things worked and how people viewed like a hospital in their community. Now it's a little old hat for me because I've been doing this for so long, but like those initial studies really I was just shocked by them in a lot of ways. Like, we get these like surprising results and it would just like blow my mind every time.
Thank you for sharing. That resonates perfectly for on why I love research, right? One is curiosity. The other one is basically that there is a lot of variation of what we do. It's basically always like a novelty. It's almost
Yeah.
like we're building stories all the time and we encounter different things around. And the third one is because everything that we do, especially when we work closely with the client, has an impact and they can basically apply our insights, our finding, hopefully for the best and hopefully to improving the products and services. So that's really beautiful, and I know that basically you share that passion. Let's talk about your core philosophy of your company. So your whole firm run on four words: assume nothing, question everything, and you have argued that 93% of communication is not nonverbal. So, what are brands fundamentally getting wrong when they send out a survey and call it a research?
Well, I think that qual and quant work best together, honestly, because the way that I like to do survey research is I like to do qualitative first. And I like to really understand like what are the nuances of the project that we're doing and then write the survey from a nuanced perspective. But if you just write a survey and you don't do any of the qualitative first, then you miss some of those really interesting cultural things that could be happening. And so that's why I like to do I sort of follow the qual before quant kind of process. So it's not that I think that something is done wrong by doing a survey, but I feel like if a survey isn't grounded in some other kind of data, then you may not be asking the right questions. And it's hard to know what questions to ask if you haven't done at least some interviews first or a focus group first to really get a sense of how people approach the category and how people are really living that category. And what I mean by living a category is how is something really being used in daily life oftentimes is very much at odds with what the brand intended. So, for example, like somebody might have I've done a lot of work in the beverage space, right? And so there may be like assumptions that certain drinks are really great, like just for people exercising. And then you go and you talk to people who are drinking these drinks and they're using it in, there's a million different use cases that have nothing to do with exercise, right? And so,
Mm-hmm.
they may be drinking it because they have a hangover, or they may be drinking
Mm-hmm.
it for, who knows what maybe they need energy to like put up with their kids or, whatever that might be. And, when the people come up with these energy drinks, they're thinking about it of like a super fit athlete who's gonna like use it in the gym and get their energy. And yeah, that might be a use case, but it's not gonna be everything. And so it's these kinds of things like understanding how people are living through the categories that really can help to frame up that quantitative research and really validate what we heard. So I like quant in as much as it validates, but I feel like just on its own, I think it has its shortcomings.
100%. And this is the beauty of mixing methods, right? And understanding how we can integrate different ways or different methods to get the responses from the client. How has been this process for you, given the fact that your background it's more on the qualitative space? What you do right now? I know that your agency has been evolved, and if you can basically tell us a little bit about that process, that would be amazing.
Can you rephrase the question? I didn't totally understand your question.
Yeah, so basically, I know that your background is more qualitative by nature.
Mhm.
How you have been integrating more quantitative or other kind of, methodologies or methods in your practice nowadays?
Yeah, I mean, every study that we do is custom. So we talk with the client, we try and find out like what are the things you guys are trying to know and who's it for? Is it for your stakeholders? Is it, who are the stakeholders? Is it for your marketing department? Is it for product testing? Is it for and really dive into. I think about those initial like intake calls as very much an IDI in and of itself, because I really try and sit with the client to understand like what are the objectives, what are they trying to get to know, and sometimes I'll say, okay, let's before we dive in and before I even sell you on focus groups and a survey, etc., let's find out, let's do desk research first. Because sometimes you talk to a client and they haven't done any research yet, and there's a lot that they don't know. And so it's hard to even test against something that they don't know. So I think it's important to really sit with the client, figure out what do they know? What do they need to know? What's the research going to be used for? Who's it for? And then from there, um, put together a research design that makes sense for that project. And if you need to start with just doing desk research for a couple of weeks to like get a handle on the category, then that can be a place to start. Sometimes it's let's do sometimes the clients already know. Sometimes they've done like I'm working on one right now with a really great telecom client, and they have a new product coming out. And they did their own survey first, and they sent me that survey result, and they said, okay, here's what we already know about the category. Here's what we have identified as our segments that we're going to recruit from just based off of this survey. We found out that these are the people who are the most interested in this new product. And then from there, I could write a qualitative discussion guide that built on the quant research that they already did. And then we can kind of build out the discussion guide, and build out the research objectives against that background. Now, I'm guessing they're going to do some more quant testing. They have a lot of internal capabilities, so I'm not going to be doing the quant with them. But essentially, we can customize it according to what they know and what they want to find out. And it's so far we did the first groups today, and they were amazing. So um, really approaching every project as its own thing and not trying to put like a one size fits all kind of research methodology, I think really matters because, not every category or not every product needs the same kind of methodology. So really designing that for the client as well as like whatever their budget considerations are and, deadlines that are internal and things like that, then we really try and build it out according to what they need.
So that's why it's important to frame the brief and understanding the expectations from the very beginning.
Hmm.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts about, synthetic data and quick results, just from your point of view. I am really hearing that. So
Yeah, I
yeah.
I I do not take synthetic data seriously, and I think that I have far more criticisms than I probably wanna go on record for saying. I just don't
Yeah.
understand it. I don't understand why we're gonna take the consumer out. Why even call it research? Why even call it data? Like, it doesn't make sense. If a person's not taking the survey, then we're just creating stories that we wanna hear. Right? And the thing is, like, in the consumer research I've done in 15 years, I've done probably 5,000 sessions if I had to guess, right? One thing that I know to be true, consumers do not tell you what you want to hear. They tell you things you absolutely don't want to hear. I've seen clients be crestfallen because their projects or their products or their service just does not fly. Okay. And if you're building out synthetic data, you're going to tell a story that you want to hear. So I just don't see. I don't understand like even what the point of it is or like why people are doing it. So, same with AI moderation. I don't understand like why AI moderate like so we're gonna take a fake moderator and we're gonna put it together with fake data and we're gonna sell this to the clients as sound research. Like I honestly just don't get it.
Yeah, 100%. And then you lose all the emotion or all the connection with the real consumer. And then in order to create the insights, you need to trust on whatever mm, data that basically the machine was able to capture, but not the real momentum, not the real connection. Yeah,
Yeah, and
100%.
also, like, one of the jobs of the researcher is to draw upon everything they know to kind of help put it into context for the client, right? Or, like, a lot of times what I'm doing is we'll do an intro and it's just like, "Hey, talk about yourself for a minute." And people don't realize I'm taking notes on what I'm hearing in that intro because I'm understanding that, like, the story that people begin to present themselves with is very much what's going to color all their perspectives all the way down, right? Like I had a guy in my group earlier today who was an accountant, right? Noted it down. And guess what? He was the guy when we were talking about the project or about the new service the new product slash service that's out there. He was all about the numbers. Surprise, surprise. He's an accountant, right? And so,
Yep.
he very much led the charge within the group about like pushing on, okay, well, what about this fee? What about that fee? What about this? What about that? And then at the end, he's like, oh, I'm switching to this because as soon as this is available, because I'm going to say, he sat there, did back of the napkin math and in my group could tell me in real time how much money he was saving. Right. And so, it's important to know contextually, like, okay, this is the one accountant in my group. I'm going to let this guy talk because this person is going to illuminate what the cost uh, implications are, for the
Yeah,
rest of the
and you
group.
can
Right.
build with him the whole canvas. Otherwise, if you don't have the experience or if you don't connect the dots, no one's will connect it, right? You
Right.
can expect that an AI will be able to connect all these
AI is not
dots.
going to connect those dots. Like we were working on some some really interesting user testing uh, for a company that does sound systems. And one of the things that was really challenging for people to understand was essentially we were asking them to change their behavior. Okay. AI is not going to pick up on that, because the things that like the questions that people were asking were really against a backdrop of I have done this way for 20 years, 30 years. And now your product, which is really cool, is having
Hmm.
me do this an entirely different way. Okay. And how is that going to fit into the design of my house, the design of my system, the design of like how other people use it, stuff like that. And what we really chalked it up to when we sat around and did the debriefing, and I was working with another really, really smart team, researchers from Europe, and we were all sitting down and debriefing on it. And what it all boiled down to was behavioral change. Okay. I do not see AI picking up on that. AI is not going to see the higher kind of layer of insights that you're going to get when you're working with an insights team. It's just not going to pick up on that. It can pull a quote. Like, sure, if I put my data set into
Of course,
Claude and I say, find me a quote about what people said about their smartphone, yeah, it can find that. Like, that's cool. But that
to
doesn't.
analyze like and dislikes, it's fine. So,
Yeah, or like, "Hey,
yeah.
give me a list of all brands of speakers that people used." Okay, great. It gave me a list. Cool. But that's pretty much like what a research assistant would do for you. Like an underling, like it's like basically the stuff that you're giving AI is like the stuff you might hand to an intern, right? Find me a quote, make me a list, stuff like that. But it's not going to be those higher level analyses that you get when you've done research for years and years. It's just not going to be that same caliber. And then you add in the synthetic data, so you're telling a story that's not even from real people. So or it's modeled on real people. So I don't actually totally understand how it works because I just kind of reject it outright. So I haven't like gotten into the weeds of how they do the data modeling. But like my thought is if you're going to do research, you got to go to people's houses. You got to talk to them on Zoom. You got to.
Yeah, I agree. On my experience, synthetic data works better on quantitative research. And when people start asking questions, how this is built, what is the difference between weighting data and synthetic data, I mean, there are always questions because at the end of the day, what they are doing is just extrapolating a percentage, a small percentage of responses with, what the AI will respond. But at the end, they need the real respondents to till I
Yes.
think it's 60-70% should be actual respondents. So at the end of the day, it
But what
just
what does that other 30% or 40% even do then?
is something
Why not
created
just have
like
a
it's
smaller
a
sample?
weighting data, but at the end of the day, is yeah. So I had those discussions, and at the end is basically always like open ended. And I feel that for qualitative studies, there is not a connection with the actual, respondents
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Well, like
Um,
we did a really interesting survey for a company that they do like an annual survey that they use as kind of what do you call it? They're an agency that does executive search, and then they do an annual survey, and then they publish that as like kind of thought leadership. And
okay.
when we did all these data cuts for them, and the more we cut the data, the more interesting the story became because they wanted to understand the multi-generational workforce and like what does it mean to have our workforce for the first time has 5 generations all coexisting. You have everybody from Gen Z up through boomers who are in the workplace. And it was really, really interesting because the more we cut the data, the more like a very clear picture emerged. And I just don't see synthetic data like doing that. The story that was emerging was that the younger the people are, the less they feel understood by the workplace. And then all the older people think the younger people are just lazy and do nothing. And all the young people feel totally misunderstood. And
Of course.
when we like cut it, by we cut everything by like their position and their age, we started to really see this picture. And if we didn't do it that way, that wouldn't tell a story. We would just we would have some data on people in the workplace, and at first glance it all looks hunky dory, but it's not until you really cut it and start to look at it and read between the lines that you get a very clear coherent story. And that's what they're going to actually be publishing as their thought leadership, was this kind of piece about where the generations really butt up against each other and how unaware managerial people in managerial positions, as well as all the way up through the C-suite, have no clue that any of this is even going on. They think their workforce is just fine and everybody's just getting things done. They literally don't know what's going on from this kind of emotional level. So it's not that every study needs qualitative, but you bring those qualitative sensibilities when you're analyzing the quant data to really like get at those nuances. And I just don't see AI getting there. I don't see.
No, right now, I mean, we will see if in the future, but at least, they need to be interiorized first. What see maybe one use is more about, um, because you have the actual data, right? You build the actual data with the consumer, and then AI can help you to create some sort of presentations or ways to communicate that with the client.
Mhm.
And you can use, in some sort, some AI to do that, but the data should be real data.
Yeah. Yeah.
Otherwise it won't work. And that's exactly, I found that you have a film editor on your team who turns qualitative data into
Mhm.
video persona reels.
Yeah, yeah.
That's not something more research firms do, right? And then, when you hand a client a video reel instead of a slide deck, what changes in how they receive the insights and act on?
Usually when they buy it, 9 times out of 10, if they opt for that, it's because they are trying to get funding. And so if they're kind of in those initial stages where they're trying to get funding for the organization, they find that the videos are much more impactful for showing it to investors than showing a PowerPoint presentation. And I think it's because people feel like PowerPoints just make people tune out versus like a video. We were running one for this really cool financial product last year and they wanted a video. And we just put it up in front of people and we had people react to it. And we had some people that were so engaged. They were like, sign me up yesterday. Like, I want this. This is awesome. I love the way this tool works. I love what I can do with it. I love the projections and on and on and on. And they really liked having that reel because it's much more impactful to show people being like, wow, that's so cool, and like the real like human reaction to it versus 10% of respondents said that they would use it tomorrow. Like it's just more real, more human. So that's usually when they want it. I've had some other situations where we're doing segmentation, and sometimes they want it on the segmentation. So For example, if they've done some quant testing and then through the quant they figured out that they've done like some kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Like a typing tool, where they like figure out like what are
Yes.
the different consumer types,
Hmm.
and that they want to go and do research for that. They really like having the videos for things like that. So like I worked on one where we were talking about like people who buy boats, and they wanted to know, they had done all this research leading up to, we did a bunch of ethnographies with them. I think we did like 18 or 20 ethnographies across 3 cities, and they really wanted to understand who are these people from a human perspective, so that they can not just market to them, but also help to answer their questions and help to really understand them as people and what are their needs, what are the need states. And so that was really helpful because, it's really helpful for them to understand the difference between a person that really likes to go on a boat and likes to have friends that have boats versus the person that wants to actually own one. Two very different people, right? And then the people who want to own one, some people just want to have a canoe so they can sail away and get away from people. And some people want to have a big party boat so they can invite their huge family to hang out, in the sun on the lake, during the summer. Really different types of people. And so doing like a film for that was really helpful for them, because it really helps to like bring that human dimension to understanding what their segments were.
Yeah, 100%. It's basically show versus tell, right? And if you show them a real example, it's a little bit different. Wonder how things gonna look in 5 years or even in couple years when we can build avatars pretty easily and basically present those avatars to clients, basically, and they can ask questions and interact. That basically could have answers on their own. Interested to see what the future will be around that. Of course, the quality of this avatar should be rooted in real research. Otherwise, it was just answer things that doesn't make sense.
And one methodology that I learned from some of my partners in Europe, they love to do these box pops where you run a focus group and then you get a really good answer from somebody, right? Like somebody just says something that nails it. After the focus group, you bring them over and you say, "Hey, remember that thing you said about blah blah blah? Can you say that again for my phone?" And then you do these little kind of like one person type of interviews where maybe they just answer one question. And those are really nice to kind of have in your reporting because it just brings it to life. And it's just much more impactful when you hear a consumer say, "Yeah, I'm going to sign up for this because it's going to help me with my investment strategy because I literally don't know how to invest. And this is a really, really great thing for me so that I don't have to go take a course on investing. I can just sign up for this one thing and do it, and I don't have to think about it." So much more impactful, than just PowerPoints with lots and lots and lots of text. A lot of people don't like to read, which is an additional problem, especially if you're trying to get funding and you want people's full attention. Video is really a great strategy for getting that full attention if you're, trying to persuade investors or whomever.
Yeah, real examples, real people, real emotions. So you just wrap up 14 months, three language, 36 session community assessment in San Leandro, and
Mhm.
you have published a framework for helping foreign brands to decode US consumers. What does research at that linguistic depth teach you at that a monolingual English only study can see?
So we did that. That study was interesting because it wasn't just multilingual, but it was multiracial as well. So we did groups with Spanish speakers, we did groups with African Americans, we did groups with Chinese Americans, and some of them weren't Americans, some of them were just um legal residents. And then we talked with the community and just kind of like at large. And then we broke that up very interestingly as well, because we broke it up by age and then we broke it up by parental status. Because we were working for a library. And the truth is the library is a community resource for everybody. So you really need to get everybody's representation. And what we did for that study is we actually looked at the census data based on San Leandro. And we said, okay, San Leandro is 20% Chinese. We need Chinese groups. San Leandro, I'm just making up stats off the top of my head. I can't remember what the breakdowns were, but we based the breakdown on the actual statistics of the population. And so anybody who made up 10% or more got their own focus group. And so this was a really, really interesting way to do it. And we matched it with the moderators. So we had a Spanish speaker do the Spanish groups, not me. Like we had a Spanish speaker do that. We had an African American woman who hosted the groups with African Americans. And this city that we did some work with in San Leandro, they actually have a real negative history with racial segregation and segregation through housing. And so it could be very sensitive as a topic. So it made a lot more sense to have an African American moderator to talk to those African American groups. I spoke with teenagers. I talked to parents, different levels. And so in so doing, we had every bit of nuance of every bit of data in that report was framed within the cultural nuances of each group that we interviewed, right? So we broke it out, like, for example, what resources retirees in the Bay Area wanted were not your grandmother's resources, okay? Like, they wanted courses on how to run AI. Okay, these people, since it's in the Bay Area, these people were really tech savvy. Even the older retirees were really into tech. And so, it wasn't like teach me how to use Microsoft Word, it was teach me how to use ChatGPT, right? And then we had the Chinese population. They had some really specific needs because apparently a lot of them own properties, and so they needed a lot of help with like property law and things like that. So it was very interesting to get those nuances and to understand them from that cultural perspective. And then we were able to really, the other thing that we did is we talked to key opinion leaders in the community as well, and that really, really helped because there were, like, certain resources that people wanted, and then we were able to talk to these KOLs, these, key opinion leaders, and find out, like, easy solves to a lot of the resources that people wanted. So by pulling all of that in together, and we talked to the key opinion leaders a little bit later on in the study. So first we talked to the community, then we talked to the key opinion leaders, then we actually interviewed pretty much the whole library staff as well to understand, like, what things they were seeing. And, bringing in that sample was huge. There was, like, 200 people, 190 people was a lot. And so we were really able to get uh, nuanced insights, very easy answers to resources, and kind of learn like what resources does the library need to offer and what resources does the library just need to refer people to. Like the library, for example, doesn't have to have homeless resources. They don't have to have a place for someone who's unhoused to take a shower. All they need is the number, which is 211, to tell if somebody, unhoused comes in off the street and they want to know about resources. Here's the number to call, right? And they could just put together like some little info cards like, hey, here's an easy toll-free number. Call this number. They'll take care of everything that you need. Done. And so we were really able to kind of help to connect the community with the library and figure out and then help them with their 5-year strategic plan to decide which things they were going to focus on. And so it culminated with that strategic plan. And yeah, it was like a full year of research, but all very grounded in data, all grounded in nuanced cultural insights, and then that informed their 5-year plan, which they're still doing now.
That's an amazing example on how a research becomes more important than life itself, right? Able to connect different dots and understanding, how places make or mean something different for different people,
Yeah.
and how you can integrate that into different significances that works well for everybody, and how you
Hmm.
can create community at the end of the days, because
Yeah.
everything is interrelated, and you need to create those signals that make a sense of community for everybody.
Hmm.
in a very cohesive way. So yeah, thank you for sharing. And I am always curious how this travels, I mean, founder to founder, the clients who turn out to be the best fit, like the cancer support community or this community work, how they usually find their way to you, how you usually get your clients.
Different ways. A lot of times it's through web searches and we do a lot of content marketing. A lot of times it's through referrals. And so that's been, I mean, I've been in business a long time, so we get a lot of, people went from one company to another and they take us with them, so that's always a nice one. Sometimes they're finding us through just web searching. Like we've recently begun to specialize in private schools, K through 12. And we picked up that specialization right after COVID, because during COVID, when schools went online, um, people dropped out of private schools
The
en masse.
schools,
Because
yeah, they
I mean, from a
don't need to
parental
pay
perspective,
20,
why would
20
you
to
pay tuition?
30, 40,000 if they do remote, right?
Right,
Yeah.
and they're like, "I'm not paying $30,000 a year for my kid to learn on Zoom." So, all of these schools, when schools went back in session, all these schools had really low enrollment numbers, and that was like a panic moment for a lot of them. And so a lot of them reached out and started doing market research. And so we started with just one project, and then we created a lot of content marketing around that project. And then now, and then I've gone and spoken at conferences with that one client, asked me if I would go and present with him. And we presented it twice, once in Vegas, once in Boston. And then that's kind of snowballed. And so when people are searching around on the web for market research agencies that work with private schools, we're coming up, right? And if they do an AI search, especially, the AI searches really pick up on our content marketing. Because our content marketing, again, is very much based in our experience. It's not just, oh, I want to do research on resorts in Belize because I want to go to a resort in Belize. It's not like based off of that, right? Like it's actually based on studies that we've done. And so, through web searches, people are kind of finding their way to us through that content.
That's great. And Jenny, I am curious, what if you have a magic wand to fix something in your business, right? What will it be? You know?
Huh. I mean, it's just starts and stops. Our industry is very feast or famine. And that can be a little maddening sometimes. The feast or famine thing I could do without, right? Like
Yeah,
everything.
sometimes you're super busy, right? I can't take anymore, right? It's like
Yeah.
yeah, it
And
happens.
then and then you'll have, like, a month that you're sitting on your hands and you're like, "What is happening?" Right? And so, that's the one thing that I would fix would be, it would be very nice to have more of a, subscription type service, but we just don't. This isn't the kind of thing where we have a need for a subscription, or, because we don't have like a research platform. So we're not like a Discuss.io or an iTracks where they can, like, people pay a subscription and then they get software and they can use it, right? Like there's nothing that we do that anyone would have a subscription for. So every study has to be sold individually, as it goes. And so that could be stressful at times. So that would be like the one thing that I would fix if I could fix anything.
Perfect. And one recommendation to, business owners like you, that focus a lot on qualitative research as well, and when to use AI, or when not. I know that we talk about a little bit about it, but if you have areas when you feel that it's useful or helps.
Well, this is what I say. Don't let AI do your analysis for you. You still need to do your own analysis. Let AI be your supporting friend, but not the don't leave it up to AI to get the big broad findings, cuz it just can't. And it doesn't do a very good job, and it doesn't have your expertise. So, one thing I've done that really helps me is I've trained AI how to write like me. So I've trained it, like I've fed it lots of things that I've written so it can understand, like, how I write.
The
And
way, yeah,
yeah,
you're
and
right.
it does pretty well. It does pretty well with that. So, I mean, you need to do your own analysis. You need to sit down and say, you don't ever skip the debrief with the clients, right? The debrief with the clients is your bread and butter, and that is going to be your analysis. Like that's when the analysis gets done, is when you sit down with the clients after all the groups are done and you talk about everything. You need to have that. Do not skip that. And that should be the framework that you build from. And then if you want to use AI to pull some quotes, cool. If you want to like take a couple of things and say, okay, write a paragraph on this, fine. But don't leave it to do your job for you. You know, like you can use AI like it's your intern. That's the best way I can describe it, is use it as an intern. I feel bad for interns of the world because I don't know how anyone is gonna get an internship in market research anymore because now that we have AI to pull quotes for us and like make a list or things like that, I don't know how anybody entry level is gonna get into our industry. And so we need to really think about what's
Get
the
the
future.
experience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what's the future of the recent college grad, and how do they get into our industry when we're using AI for all kinds of stuff? And you should never train a young person on AI because then they're not going to know how to actually do the work. And you need to know how to do your analysis. Like AI should only be for like pulling quotes or make a chart or like, hey, here's some attributes, put this in a Venn diagram for me. Cool. Right, but if you don't, like, fundamentally understand research, your Venn diagram is just gonna be useless, right? Because you still have to know what's gonna go in there. It's your brain that's going to really do that analysis, and then the AI is just gonna support you. But I just don't know how, like, young people are gonna even transition into our industry anymore, because when I think about how I got my start, it was 2 ways. One was doing intercepts, right? Like in stores and going up to people with tablets and doing that kind of stuff. And secondarily, it was doing report writing because I found like that was one area of support work that people were willing to give to a young researcher
A
when I
young
was.
researcher that
Yeah.
was ready to work long
Yeah.
hours in order to make it happen.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right. And so I just don't see like where, what's the future of our industry if we're using AI so much that we don't like need any young people to kind of help us with support? Well, then who's going to take our place, right? So like we have to really think through like making ourselves extinct, really, and like making our industry extinct. If we use AI too much, then where's the opening for these for the entry level people?
100%. It's a different, like a career path right now. For them to gain the experience and the criteria in order to make a season like a decisions right now, I feel it's kind of harder because the ability to get fast responses sometimes replaces that criteria creation, right? Like, hey, this is the way that it should be.
Mhm.
So yeah, interesting times. Jenny, this has been a really great conversation. The way you build these, starting from anthropological fieldwork, and we can talk about more about that as well. But using qualitative research to get at the truths, the numbers can surface, and building this multilingual, multicultural team that can actually meet communities where they are. That's exactly the kind of stories this show is built for. Where can people find you and ready to launch research if they want to connect?
Oh, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on my website, readytolaunchresearch.com. Or you can find me through my personal website, jennycarubian.com.
Perfect. And that's a wrap up on this one. Huge thanks to Jenny for walking us through that, what this actually looks like to treat consumers as full human beings, not data points, and building an agency around that conviction for over a decade. If you got something of it, do me a favor, hit subscribe and drop a comment with we're on LinkedIn. So we'll see you on the next episode of Signal and Insights. Take care, everybody.
Thanks. Bye bye.